Good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon. I hope you can hear me loud and clear. So let's take a few seconds for everyone to be able to jump in. Right, I see the numbers going up. Okay, so we're gonna get started. Good afternoon, everyone. For those of you who are in Europe or in Africa, good afternoon. If you're based in America, then good morning. And if you are in Asia or in Oceania, then good evening. Welcome and thank you for joining us for this webinar, which is called Can We Still Eat Seafood? Adopting Responsible Consumption and Production of Seafood and Aquaculture Products to Protect Marine Biodiversity. This is a virtual side event of the United Nations Ocean Decade Conference, which is taking place in Nice in the south of France as we speak. But you're probably joining us from somewhere else, so please feel free to write a little comment to tell us where you are right now, what's the weather like where you are, so that we get an idea of the variety of people who are joining us and the different countries and cities you're based in. From me, my name is Clara Boissenin. I'm a project manager and science communicator at Ecsite. Ecsite is the European network of science centers and museums. I am involved in the European Union funded project Mr.Goodfish3.0, and I am their communications manager. And it is my honor today to moderate this webinar for all of you. I'm joining from Brussels in Belgium, for those of you who know. And the weather is actually really warm today, 31 Celsius degrees. And actually, I think in Fahrenheit degrees, it would be 87 or approximately along those lines. So it's a pleasure to have everyone in here. So this webinar is co-organized by two European initiatives called Mr.Goodfish3.0 and VERIFISH, which are funded under the European Union's Research and Innovation Programme Horizon Europe. Both projects are part of the European Union's mission Restore Our Oceans and Waters by 2030, and they are working together on an awareness-raising campaign for responsible consumption and production of seafood, freshwater foods, and aquaculture products. So they decided to co-organize this event today because they wanted to explore how responsible seafood consumption and production can protect marine biodiversity while supporting resilient livelihoods for those whose income depends on the ocean. And in this webinar, we will be discussing innovations related to consumer engagement, supply chain traceability and transparency, all in line with Sustainable Development Goal 14, which is Sustainable Development Goal Life Below Water. So we will first hear from the two projects. I'm going to put the agenda up for you right now. So first, you will hear from both VERIFISH and Mr.Goodfish to see a bit what they have been up to and are planning. Then we will dive right into our panel and Q&A. And then we will have the pleasure of announcing our voluntary ocean commitments before closing for the day. So that's our little program for the day. I see that we have some comments in the chat, so let's just take a moment to celebrate the diversity of the different countries you're representing. Oh wow, we have all the way to Trinidad and Tobago, so that's quite a stretch. Welcome. We have a few people I see in different regions of France, in the Netherlands, in Denmark, in Norway, in the very north region in the Arctic. Welcome to all of you. We're now going to get started maybe with our first presentation. So I would love to give the floor to Sara Pittonet Gaiarin, who is Senior Manager at Trust IT Services and has the honor of being the project coordinator of the VERIFISH project. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen so that Sara can share her own slides.
Thanks a lot, Clara.
So Sara, you can go ahead. Yes.
Thanks a lot. Good afternoon or good morning, everybody. And indeed, it's an honor to be here and to be the coordinator of the VERIFISH initiative. So this webinar today had a title, and the title is "Can We Still Eat Seafood?" And so that's where I started today's presentation. And my answer is I don't know. But as I don't know, probably there are many other people around that don't know. And there might be consumers interested in aspects that relate more to environmental considerations or ethical aspects that might have questions about what they eat, such as where was the fish I'm eating caught? Is this stock at risk? Or with which gear type was it caught? And there might also be other type of consumers who are more conscious about health-related issues that might worry about the nutritional value of fish, or what's the risk of for pollutants or contaminants in the fish, or how was it fed during its life. So sustainability of the global food system is a growing concern. That's why we are here today. And even more in those sectors that rely on natural resources, such as fisheries and aquaculture. But the only way to take healthy, sustainable choices is having access to information. And that's what consumers need. Information about sustainability, nutrient values, provenance, or potential health risk and benefits of what we eat. That's where the VERIFISH project comes in. The VERIFISH project is supported by the Horizon Europe program of the European Commission, and it was funded to design a framework of verifiable sustainability indicators to provide information about environment, nutrition and health, or socioeconomic aspects for both aquaculture and fisheries, and to provide it all in one place. That's the challenge that we have. So when starting shaping this framework of indicators, we first identified some pillars, so the critical dimensions for sustainability. And we identify them along with environmental aspects, along with nutrition and health aspects, socioeconomic aspects, targeting, in all cases, aquaculture and captured fishery. And we have dived into this critical dimension and started looking, okay, but what really we need to consider to assess whether a product, a fish product, is sustainable or not. So if we look at nutrition and health, we are considering macronutrients, omega-3 fatty acids, vitamins, minerals, caloric content, and cholesterol. If we look at the socioeconomic aspect, we should take into consideration fair labor practices, community well-being, gender equality, and food security aspect. And then there's a huge pillar of environmental aspects that we are addressing differently according if we deal with aquaculture or capture fisheries, simply because there's the need to do so. And for environmental concerns, we are looking into aspects such as habitat impact, biosecurity, animal welfare, resource use and waste management. And similarly for capture fisheries, stock status, climate impact, or ecosystem effects. But that is not enough. So that's the first entry point. Once we have identified the pillars, we have dived into a series of indicators that should allow to explain and give a name to a particular sustainability aspect. So going back to our nutrition and health pillars, the indicators that we identify refer to nutrient values of fish, protein, vitamins again, nutrition, food and safety. Aspect that relate to corruption, respect of the WWF fishing list, prevention of forced labor, access to healthcare, medical facilities for the workers, and much more. And again, for the environmental aspect, we are looking into stunning to fisheries, ETP impact mitigation, eel loss, bycatch aspects. But then the answer is how to take these aspects into consideration. And then we go down another layer, and we refer to data sources that are verifiable, trustable, and verified already, that are available in open source and free, that can help us assess if a given species meets the indicators above. So we're building a database structure again around our three main pillars, and sourcing from databases such as those from FAO, Food Explorer, FoodX, the World Health Organization for nutrition and health aspects, for instance, or the IWWF list, flags of convenience list, ILO conventions, global slavery index, and more for socioeconomic aspects. And for environmental aspects, we rely on data coming from VERIFISH, Pittonet, UNCN, URSF, FAO-URSF, Fish Space, Fish Source, VERIFISH, or the STACF from the European Commission. So data sources that can realistically be checked, applied, verified, and used. We are using them to provide the information about the assessment of this sustainability aspect on a species by species level. We have identified a number to start with, and we are making this available via a web app, so an easy to use application available for anybody who wants to investigate the sustainability ranking of a species. What's the target? So basically, the entire community could take advantage of this model. So we are talking to consumers who seek clear and trustworthy information about sustainability or nutritional value, and that can do so by searching a species in the VERIFISH web app. But we're also talking to fishermen, for instance, who want to share the story and log specific details about their work, the fishing method, their catch, and state their contribution and commitment to sustainable fishery. The system we've built is a tiered one. The data sources that I've shown before represent what we call tier 1 data. So publicly available data from global or regional public access repositories. But we're also looking for tier 2 data with sources that can be of proprietary information and that can be attributed to a specific value chain from specific actors, such as fishermen or vessels in general, or other representatives of the fish production value chain. We are consolidating all of this into a knowledge base. That's where this information is aggregated for unified access and analysis. So going back to our question at the beginning, can we still eat seafood? I still don't know, but I can verify. And what's most important is that the approach that VERIFISH is trying to introduce is more than a technical tool or a ranking tool, is a vision for collaboration and shared responsibility. We want to bring together diverse stakeholders, so from fishery managers to NGOs, industry professionals, consumers, and of course policymakers to foster a dialogue and encourage the adoption of best practices. We have a community of practice in place, so we are looking for feedback and for contribution from many different actors in the value chain. There is a call open to join us and provide feedback, because what VERIFISH is producing is a prototype, okay, it's a pilot activity, and that needs to be validated first of all by the community of users. So we have a website that you can look at for any other information, and where you'll find also the way to connect with us. We are going to engage you in many different ways according to the commitment that you can give us, and your professional network and your interests, of course, from assessing the framework up to providing tier 2 data types or commenting on the typology of the data that we are taking into consideration. We are also kickstarting a standardization activity. So next week we will be in Copenhagen in Denmark to kickstart the Siân workshop agreement, because the VERIFISH Siân workshop agreement will lay the foundation for harmonized communication around seafood sustainability by kickstarting a standardization process, hopefully to come. And that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Sarah, for your presentation. We will now move to a second presentation of the other project co-organizing this meeting. So to present Mr.Goodfish3.0, we welcome Hélène Buisson, who is project officer at Nausicaa, Centre National de la Mer, in the north of France in Boulogne-sur-Mer.
Thank you, Clara. Just show my screen.
Yes, we can see your screen.
Perfect. So thanks a lot for being with us this afternoon. And it's also, I'm really honored to present our European project, Mr.Goodfish3.0, which has really been designed to scale up responsible seafood choice. And that's why we really thought about this crucial and quite powerful question today: can we still eat seafood? So let's see how eating seafood responsibly is probably now possible, but also necessary. So first of all, maybe I will make I will give you some ideas about how we go from Mr. Goodfish, which is the original program, from Mr.Goodfish3.0. Actually, Mr. Goodfish is also a European program and has been initiated in 2010 by 3 aquariums. So Nausicaa, where I work in Boulogne-sur-Mer, France, also by the Aquario di Genoa in Italy, and the Aquarium Finisterre in Spain. The mission of Mr. Goodfish is clearly to help consumers, but also professionals, to choose the right fish at the right time. And all this based on science and the notion of sustainability. So over the years, the program has really worked with quite a wide ecosystem, so including citizens, chefs, fishmongers, processors, retailers, schools, in the idea of raising awareness and shifting also consumption habits. And all this, we really noticed that the idea is to help also to reduce the pressure on vulnerable species. And at the same time, our aim is also to support professionals who wants to act and do better. So you see that since 2010, we are in action, but the idea is really also to think about why it matters to be in action. And let's check some figures. And when we check on those figures, let's say that it's quite urgent. As today, nearly 38% of stocks are quite overexploited. And if we check specifically in the Mediterranean and the Black Sea, it's quite worse, as the figure reaches nearly 64%. And meanwhile, we can see that we know that the consumption of aquafood has quite doubled since the 60s. And today, I mean, nowadays we are nearly around 21 kilo per person. So if we think short, it means that the ocean is feeding more people, but with less fish. So the idea is to have also a credible, science-based guidance to help consumers and professionals to act more responsibly. So that's why we launched Mr.Goodfish 3.0 at a new scale and with new ambitions. And for that point, Mr.Goodfish 3.0 is not only an update of Mr. Goodfish. As it is supported by Horizon Europe and the EU mission Restore Our Ocean and Waters, we are very lucky to work all together with 8 partners who are really involved and committed. And the idea is really to expand the original program to new reach. It means to all European basins, to marine aquaculture, but also freshwater species, and also to have to provide a new phase of digital empowerment and data harmonization. And if we focus on the different pillar that we work with, first of all, let's talk about our methodology. The marine wild species methodology is really the foundation of the Mr. Goodfish program. And if we think a bit more wider, the reality is quite complex, as not all stocks actually are like well assessed or well documented. So the idea for us is really to use a tiered decision-making framework, and we based all that on the best available science. So first of all, usually we used to start looking at whether a stock has a formal scientific assessment. For example, so of course we work a lot with the ICS data, but also we take into account national bodies data. Then we will use all this, and we classify the stocks using different criteria. So the fishing pressure, the spawning biomass. And once we have that, we will position the stock on a scale from sustainable to collapsed. And we use a framework which is definitely aligned with the Kobe matrix to have a global understanding of all. And we add also other perspectives. So we will also check if the fishing occurs during the reproductive season. We will also check if the species is caught at or above the sexual maturity size. And if all the thresholds are met, then the species will enter directly in our seasonal recommendation list, because this is what we do. We recommend by season species. But as I previously said, some stocks have a scientific assessment, but some don't have this formal scientific assessment. So what we do is that our methodology help us to go deeper. First of all, we look at we will gather all available biomass indices from research survey, observation, or we could gather. We will definitely take it into account. Then we also take into account stability of landings over 5 years when we have those numbers, and also only if we have some doubts about excluding a species or not from our recommendation, we will take input from stakeholders and fishers, local experts, in order to be sure that it's we have to exclude from our list one species. And of course, to all this, we will add some biological filters, so the same maturity size, the seasonality, so outside the breeding season, and also to check the targeted and non-targeted fishing pressure. So if all those indicators are positive and stable, then we will consider the species as eligible to be in our recommendation list. And if not, it is excluded, and this regardless the consumer demand. So the idea is really for us, it helps us also to make some focus and highlight some lesser known but often more sustainable species, while at the same time we avoid those with too many uncertainties. Ooh, sorry, my French is coming back. Also, of course, so all this work helps us to provide seasonal recommendation lists. So we do it 4 times a year, and to help us, of course, we have committees, sectoral committees, and also scientific helping us on that. So the idea is really to recommend species that are at the same time ecologically viable and also good for consumption, based on science and with a really precaution-based approach to support biodiversity and seafood culture. So above marine species, we also worked on aquaculture with different criteria, but also rigorous work. And for this, we take in consideration the type of feed, breeding practices, but also the animal welfare, of course. And the idea is really to ensure that we have relevance and credibility across Europe. And all the assessment we provide are reviewed by a multidisciplinary committee, including scientists, NGOs, and producers. A new part of work which will be enriched thanks to Mr.Goodfish 3.0 is really a methodology regarding freshwater wild species. We know that there is a strong demand to include freshwater species, and let's say that also those species are really part of a big culinary tradition in Europe, especially inland. And so the idea is really to build a dedicated methodology for those species in order to support a responsible consumption, local consumption, and also to create this methodology with the support of local actors. So, of course, once we have those recommendations, we have to bring this somehow available and understandable and bring it to life. So that's why we are building a brand new, the idea is to build a brand new digital ecosystem. So with a new app and a new website, we soon will be in the development, with the idea of having a new app which will be more consumer orientated, which will be multilingual, interactive, with geolocalization, with many filters to be able to get a recommendation regarding where you are in Europe, and also to have a lot of tips and being able to keep and share your favorites, committed spots, committed restaurants, fishmongers, etc., and also recipes. And for the new website, the idea is also to provide a more tailored space for professionals who are definitely committed with us, and also to provide them new tools, and also to give them the possibility to share events to the whole community. The idea is really to have also, we keep on doing and animating our social media. And the idea is really to have a connecting, dynamic and multilingual content and more user-friendly. So the idea, as you say, is really all we do is really built in cooperation, and all the work is really spans marine, freshwater, and farm species. And so we really gather and work with scientists, researchers, aquafood professionals, educators, civil society, and local and EU institutions. So we really have this multi-stakeholder ecosystemic approach to bridge local realities, but also to end with EU-wide objectives. It really matters for us, and this is really our guiding lines. The idea is really to also have this strong connection with the EU Mission Ocean, and to be in collaboration with different initiatives. And we are very happy to work really hand in hand with our colleagues from VERIFISH. And the idea is really to provide and to build a current and shared ecosystem for responsible seafood consumption, but across border, which is really new for Mr.Goodfish, of course. So actually, we really to have this to reach what we aim for, changing consumer habits, at least shifting them, to support or see transition for more responsible practices for professional, to make also ocean literacy actionable, and also to provide a trusted European benchmark for eco-food choices. The idea is really important for us to work with a participatory design, and really to base our work on real user needs, and also to get local legitimacy. So that's why we really work and focus on co-creation approach, and that's why we have like 3 pilot sites. So we have Norway, France, and Cyprus, and we will also replicate. So all the co-design tools and all the methods that we will get from those pilot sites, they will be also replicated in 2 other countries, in Poland and in Bulgaria, with, of course, local adaptation. But the idea is really to provide informed choices for resilient ecosystems. So what's next? As you see, we have quite a lot of work to do, but we also have deliverables and, of course, things to provide to our community and to consumers and citizens who are really interested to act and to commit for more responsibility. So the idea for us is really to provide serious game communication kits. So we are working now also on the app and website launch for next year's, and we are also working on funding and building a big awareness raising campaign, also, which will include also work with European influencers. And the idea is also really to keep on looking for people who are ready to commit. So partners in education, in retail, in gastronomy, in science, but also new regions who would like to replicate what we provide when we are building now in our pilot sites. And also, of course, the chance to be part of the EU mission is also to be able to create synergies with other European initiatives, in order really to make the sustainable aquafood like the new normal, and to empower everyone from the sea to the plate. So to the question, can we still eat seafood? Let's say Mr.Goodfish has always got a very positive communication perspective. So let's say yes, but it means by choosing the right species at the right time and from the right place. And the idea is really to get that yes, but only if we change, if we know how to choose, how to buy, and how to value it. And on this, we hope that Mr.Goodfish3.0 will provide all the tools you need for that. Thank you. So please follow us on the social network. Let's visit our website, of course, and of course we are at your disposal for any questions.
Thank you very much, Hélène. So we just heard about those 2 inspiring projects, VERIFISH and Mr.Goodfish. So now it is time to dive a bit deeper into the question, can we still eat seafood? I'm very happy to welcome 3 panelists to have this conversation and try to answer this tricky question. First, there will be Dr. Sean Astley, Secretary General at EuroFIR, the European Food Information Resource, Michelle Boonstra, co-founder and project manager of the Catch Welfare platform in the Netherlands, and Alistair, Executive Director of the European Aquaculture Society. So welcome to all three of you. Thank you for accepting to take part in this panel. I would first like to ask you to please introduce yourself to the audience and tell us why you believe transitioning towards more responsible seafood production and consumption is important. Maybe we start with Sean, please.
Thank you very much. My name's Siân Astley, and as it says, I'm Secretary General of EuroFIR. The purpose of EuroFIR is primarily the standardization and the harmonization of food composition data, although we have expanded our remit to include other forms of food data. Working on that food data in the area of seafood has been particularly interesting. It's a little bit Wild West out there. And we really do need to understand what nutrients and indeed in parallel with that, what bioactives are in seafood. In terms of why do we need to include more sustainable seafood in our diet? Well, actually, I take it back to why do we need to include more seafood? There's a lot of conversation about shifting dietary patterns away from animal-based foods to plant-based foods, and what I'm seeing is what gets neglected in there is consumption of seafood, and seafood offers us high quality, easily digestible protein and a lot of micronutrients that are missing from the European diets. So I want to see seafood included in that broader discussion, and if we're going to have seafood, it has to be responsibly sourced seafood.
Thank you very much, Michelle. Then Michelle, would you like to introduce yourself, please? Yes.
Yes. Hello, everybody. My name is Michelle. I'm here today on behalf of the VERIFISH project, where I'm mainly responsible for the sustainability indicators for wild captured seafoods, together with Christine Absil. And besides that, I am indeed the co-founder and manager of the Catch Welfare platform, which is a platform to expedite the transition to better welfare in fisheries. It's a science industry-based platform. My expertise is mainly on sustainable fisheries and innovation. I also have a seafood label together with the fishermen, a label for sustainable fishermen. And why do I think this transition is important? Almost forgot. I think it's important because besides a source for food, the ocean is also an important source of biodiversity and ecosystem services, and even a source of energy these days. So I think we need to exploit that ocean wisely.
Thank you, Michelle. And last but not least, Alistair.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us and taking part in this webinar this afternoon. I'm the director of the European Aquaculture Society, which is basically a scientific network bringing together a lot of people from different backgrounds, different research areas, education, the industry, producers, their representatives, policymakers, etc., etc. And what we do, apart from providing services to our members, is we organize an event each year in Europe, which is called Aquaculture Europe. And it gives a kind of helicopter view of what's happening in aquaculture research across all different disciplines and with all different inputs. And it brings together more than 2,000 participants each year. It's held in different locations in Europe. We're preparing the event for this year at the moment. And it gives this chance to really see what's happening in one place and one time. So it's a kind of key activity of the European Aquaculture Society. Now, when it comes to that first question, yeah, okay, I saw the two I don't know and probably yes from our first two presentations. And that's really where we're at, basically. But I would say more responsible aquaculture food production is a must. That's for sure. We have gaps in food availability and protein availability and other shortfalls, as Siân was saying, and totally agree with her on that point. And when it comes to responsible consumption, then, okay, it's an uphill road. We're making progress. It's quite slow at the moment, but I think with these two initiatives that we've seen today and with many others that are happening now, and including the event in Nice this week, I think it's coming up the agenda, and hopefully it should stay high on that for some years to come. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alistair. So I will have a few questions for this panel, but I would also encourage the audience, if they have some questions for this group, to please post them in the Q&A section of the Teams webinar app. It looks like two bubbles with a little question mark in the middle. You can use this to ask your question. And if you see a question from someone else that you believe is particularly relevant, you can vote it up using a little upwards pointing arrow, which will help us also figure out where your interests lies today. I might not have time to ask all of the questions, depending on how the conversation is going, but I will try my best to take on as many as possible. But while you reflect on the questions you would like to ask the panelists, I will come back to them with a few first questions. So first, one complaint we often hear from consumers is that seafood is too expensive and that sustainable or responsible options are sometimes out of reach for a lot of people. And at the same time, in the seafood industry, there is economic pressures coming through different factors, such as inflation, for instance. So the first question I would like to ask is, how can we balance responsible seafood consumption and production with those economic pressures? May I start maybe with Alistair on this one? Would you be okay?
I certainly would, and yeah, it's true that for the last few years, at least, we've been seeing variability in consumption data. In many cases, for the last few years, it's been going down or remaining stagnant, and that's quite worrying. So the question there is it really price that's the main driver for that? And as more and more knowledge is gained on this consumer science aspect, of which I'm not an expert, I get the feeling that it's not the only driver. The economic pressures for the operators, the providers of seafood. I'm not a fisheries expert, but I assume that fuel and other operating costs are still high on the percentage and proportion of their production costs, let's say. In aquaculture, it's basically about feed. And when we look at aquaculture production costs over the last few years, they haven't risen hugely. So something is happening between or somewhere along the value chain that we still haven't got a good understanding of. And so we're a little bit in the shade on that one.
Thank you, Alistair. Sean or Michelle, would you also like to react to this question? Or to what Alistair just said?
Yeah, well, I think Alistair is right on the fuel consumption, because that's for a lot of fishing methods a main cost, and that's highly fluctuating. So becoming more independent of that fuel cost by more climate neutral fishing vessels is definitely one to focus on. And I think from the consumer side, fish is very expensive sometimes if you necessarily want a certain species, but sometimes there's other species available that are much cheaper. So also a little bit of creativity, I think, can really help people to consume seafood with lower cost.
I think I'd
Sean,
like
you want
to
to react?
Go ahead. I think I'd like to say I agree with Michelle that we know from surveys in Europe that consumers perceive fish as expensive, seafood in general as expensive. It's perceived as an aspirational product. And I think that isn't entirely true. Yes, there are species that are expensive, but there are many species that are underutilized and offer just as good a quality product that can be used to replace expensive or indeed species that are under pressure and we need to nudge people gently in the direction of those more affordable species and maybe help them know how to utilize them as well, because I think that's one of the biggest challenges we face with seafood, that unless you've grown up in a household where you're familiar with seafood and you know what to do with it, then it's kind of like, I'm not quite sure what to do with that. I'll go and buy something else that I know what to do with.
I think in particular in both our countries, Sean, in the Netherlands and the UK, people are not very creative with cooking with seafood. So maybe we can learn from the Mediterranean countries to be a bit better.
Yeah, and just more familiar. greater familiarity.
Yeah.
And then if I may follow up on this comment that you both made, Sean and Michelle, regarding familiarity with the product, that it's sometimes a perceived issue that the cost is an obstacle, but sometimes it's a know-how or familiarity with the food. You were talking about nudging, Sean. I'm just wondering if there are some ideas of incentives or nudges or areas of communication we should be exploring to help raise awareness in this regards. I'm just opening this question to you. Yes.
Well, I think Mr. Goodfish and VERIFISH are trying to do that, and we're trying to provide the different actors along the different chains with the information they need, because this is not just about consumers. This is also about others in the chain who need to be supported in that process. If you're a local fishery and you're wanting people to buy products, but then you're asked questions about, well, you know, where does it come from? Is it good for me? What is it sustainable? And you don't necessarily have access to that information in a ready format and how to talk about it in a confident way, and an honest and validated way. Then I think it can be really challenging for actors in the chain as well. So I think both projects are trying to address that. What we must avoid is being didactic or in some way patronizing. That's not our job. And this is why it's about gentle nudges rather than saying you must do this. It's unrealistic to think we're going to move everybody, but we can move some of the early adopters. We can move some of the ones that are asking for that information, that are looking for that information, and we can provide that with them. How do you do it? I think it's about a degree of transparency. And there I would like to separate out transparency, because we have really complicated food chains. And there's a lot of effort in a lot of projects trying to make those simpler to understand, but also transparency in, I'm looking at a fish, what does that tell me? And we know we've met complexity in our own systems. We're very good at finding the indicators that we've been talking about, VERIFISH, from wherever the fish or the seafood is grown up to the point of landing. But we know there is real complexity in the landing to the plate, and how do we start to address those? So I think there are a number of areas where we can start to bring clarity, and in bringing that clarity and sharing that information, sharing that data, we can make those nudges.
Thank you, Sean. I think, Alistair, you wanted to react.
Yes, and just not really to react, but to add something in, another factor which I see as one of being of trusted sources of information. So, for example, where you have fishmongers or fishmongers in supermarkets, then one of their roles could and should be in proposing new offers to the consumer, because we're focused on like 4 or 5 species that we know super well, we've eaten for generations, etc. But in aquaculture, at least, we produce 70 different species in Europe. The second point is, let's make use of our holiday experiences. If we go and eat some nice sea bream in Greece or in Croatia or whatever, we come back home, we want to do that. We want to relive that experience. And that gets us away from our kind of everyday species, if you like. So having the possibility to open up new recipe ideas, new preparation ideas, etc., can play upon that kind of reliving your holiday experience.
Thank you very much. Before I move to my next question, do one of you still wish to react or add something to this conversation at this stage? We will be talking more about traceability and transparency in a moment as well, because this is obviously a very important question when we talk about seafood. But at this stage, if that's okay for you, I will move to the next question I will have for you. So in addition to climate change, which is putting a strain on marine biodiversity, there are certain practices in the fisheries industry industry that do contribute to a certain extent to decline in marine biodiversity. It could be via overfishing, by using gear that might contribute to habitat destruction. It could be also difficulties with managing bycatch as well. And some people might actually say that aquaculture might be a way to circumvent this issue, or to try and find a sustainable alternative there. So this is a question first to Alistair. To what extent would you say that aquaculture is a sustainable alternative to wild catch?
It's not an alternative, actually, Clara. I think it's very clear that it's a complement. There's nobody that wants to see fisheries decline globally. And everybody has an interest in being able to source the seafood that they want to choose. And if there's a preference for captured fish because of potentially species availability or product availability, or if there's a preference for aquaculture fish for whatever reason, traceability, for example, freshness, availability, etc., then consumers should have that choice. So it's a complement. And actually what we find in terms of the species available, at least for European consumers, is that there are very few species that can and do both come from capture and also from aquaculture. We see it with several species like turbot, like sea bass and others. But generally speaking, if you're looking for a white fish, typically from the Atlantic, it's not going to come from aquaculture. And if you're looking for Atlantic salmon, it is definitely going to come from aquaculture. So there's a labeling obligation, of course, to state the origin of the fish, but they're complements on the market. When you talked about the issues, let's say, related to fisheries, then aquaculture has a lot by self own initiatives, if you like, focused a lot on the last decade or two in aspects such as nutrition, breeding, health and welfare management, use of technology to better understand and predict our production, and therefore provide product at the right time in the right place. And generally aquaculture is adopting more circular practices. So we're trying to, on our side of things, I think it's a reduction of environmental footprint. It's a minimalization of the impact on the environment, knowing that all food production has an impact on the environment. And it's making sure that we can produce not only more efficiently, because that gives economic gains to us as producers, but also to be able to use our resources to a more efficient level. And I think the biggest sea change in that has come on aquaculture nutrition, where a lot of people still think that we use 5, 6, 10 kilos of wild fish to produce 1 kilo of aquaculture fish. And that couldn't be farther from the truth. If you go to the Marine Ingredients website, which used to be called IFO, they have a kind of key performance indicator they call fish in, fish out. And then the name says it all. And most aquaculture species are close to 1. So we can actually say with some confidence that we are one of the most efficient protein producers in aquaculture. So again, we have our pressures. We're all victims in some ways of climate change, and we have to adapt to that, but that also provides opportunities for us in both sectors. So it's not a sustainable alternative to capture, it's a sustainable complement to fisheries.
Thank you very much, Alistair. Maybe also, Michelle, you could react to this, because here Alistair is saying we're not talking about aquaculture being an alternative. We're talking about aquaculture being a complement to wild catch. And I was wondering if you have any reaction to this.
No, I fully agree with that, and it's a very diplomatic and good answer, I think. And what I hear among fishermen are in general very negative about aquaculture because they see it as their enemy, and I think they shouldn't, because it does. There's not enough fish in the sea to feed everybody these days, and aquaculture can help out with remaining healthy fish stocks. So, yeah, I really agree with that answer. And both have different challenges on their own, but.
Yeah, absolutely do. Sean, would you also like to react maybe from a nutritional perspective? Is there anything we should keep in mind?
Well, first of all, I want to agree with Alistair and Michelle and just say, eat it. I think we have to have both systems. Both systems have challenges. Both systems need to not compete and be complementary, because Michelle's quite right. There isn't enough fish in the sea to feed everybody. And it's also impractical that we think we're always going to move everybody. What I do think is interesting is there's not a lot of food composition data around wild captured species versus aquaculture species, but what there is would suggest that there are nutritional differences, and that there are nutritional differences because of the feed, which would also imply that even between aquaculture systems, you will find differences in the composition of the fillet or other product composition, and we don't understand enough about that. So the one that comes to mind that I think the data is robust is that there is a move for feeding salmon more plant-based feeds. That means that we're increasing the omega-6 in the fillet, when the benefit that most humans are getting is the omega-3. We get enough omega-6 in our diet from other plant sources, and I don't think it is necessarily helpful for that shift if that's where we're going. I understand why in terms of the issues around aquaculture, but we really need more data to understand what does changing the feed for the fish mean for the fillet, and therefore the humans who are consuming them.
Thank you very much, Sean. I would just like also to take a short break to remind the audience who is listening very attentively that if you have questions for our speakers, you can put them on the Q&A tab of Teams. I will be able to take them on later. And I actually still have some more questions that I would like to ask the panel. So my next point would be that in general, we understand that in the seafood sector, whether it's aquaculture or fisheries, we're working very hard towards improving sustainability. There is still some margin for progress to better protect marine biodiversity. But of course, this industry also has to obey the law of supply and demand. So I would like us to take a moment to talk a little bit more about the consumer side of the story. So my question would be, what role do consumer awareness and behavior change truly play in the picture of this transition towards a more responsible approach to seafood? And I would like to give the floor first to Sean, if that's okay for you.
I've been thinking about this question when we were talking about questions and some issues, and actually this is the answer. And I say this because we all, mobile phones, for those of us that are old enough, started off as just doing phones and not particularly well. And the reason the business has changed is because consumers said, we want this. And we can look at other sectors where we have seen similar. There was an issue with car security because people started cloning keys. And consumers says, I've bought a very expensive car. I don't want it stolen. I want my key to be better. And the car industry responded. And therefore, I think consumers also have a role here. And that is to say, we want better, more sustainable, more transparent food chain supplies within the different seafood chains. Now, clearly they can do it individually because they can go and have a conversation with their local fishmonger, and hopefully that supplier can provide information. But they can also do it collectively through making choices in supermarkets, making choices in restaurants, and also obviously consumer bodies can also support that process of feeding back to saying what consumers want. And we see that when we have conversations with them in surveys, we see that they want greater transparency. They want to understand where their food is coming from. They want to know that it's coming from ethically, both from the point of view of the animal, whatever the animal might be, but also the humans that are involved in the food chains.
Thank you, Sean. Michelle, would you like to say something?
Yes, because I'm working on the other side a lot of times with fishermen or other parties in the supply chain, where I'm trying to collaborate on an innovation, for example, a stunner for fish, or a bycatch mitigation measure, or to source more sustainable seafood. And then often I get the reaction, yeah, but nobody's asking, nobody cares. And then they're not interested to join this innovation. So even if they had one question about it, it would already be a different story. So asking questions really makes a difference. Because if there's people asking for something, it changes the whole perception of the other people in the seafood chain. So just asking questions, where does this fish come from? Was it caught sustainably? Was it stunned? Can make a big difference. The more, the better, of course, but even as an individual.
Showing your interests directly to the producers and the fishmongers, for instance. Alistair, would you also like to respond to this question and give your take on the consumer side of the question?
I'm glad that Siân thought a bit about how she was going to answer this question, because she's hit the nail on the head. And certainly we get so much information from this little screen that's either in a phone or a tablet form. And the big thing there is well, there's two aspects. I think first of all, we're in information overload, and have been for some years now, even a generation. So the question is, what information is useful? What can I trust? And so it's a question about information sources. And I think one thing that Mr.Goodfish, for example, built up over the years, especially in France, and now hopefully as it expands and goes to the next level, is it has become a very trusted resource. And I think for me, that's the key. There's a lot of people talking about false or fake or misrepresentative news, and that's becoming part of our society. So it's a case of trusting the answers that we get to the questions we have. And then the second point is, when I go for IT support, who do I go to? I go to my children, of course, because they know a hell of a lot more about this than I do. So I love the examples that we see, especially in aquaculture, about educating younger people, and there are many of them, from primary class level up to teenager level. Not only these initiatives, but also the aquaria, the public aquaria around Europe have a role to play there. And I think that nudging consumers towards changing their ways, as it were, a big driver of that is the conversations that we have over dinner, whether that's every evening or just once a week, or depending on how we live our lives, but talking about issues that affect our world. And this is a good place to be a fly on the wall and listen to those those conversations about how children drive their parents in some ways.
Very glad to hear you talk about youth education on this topic, coming from science education myself. Very, very glad to hear it. You were talking a bit about transparency, so I would like to go in that direction. But before, I just would like to check if Siân or Michel would still like to add something on the topic of consumer engagement. No? Okay, so in that case, I see there are also some questions popping up in the Q&A, so I will be able to come to that in a moment. I would first like to go to transparency. So one common complaint also that we receive from the general public, from citizens and consumers, is that compared to other types of foods, they sometimes struggle a bit to understand the implications behind the choices they make when it comes to seafood. In particular, we observe a lack of food label or seafood label literacy, which is amplified also by the complexity of the labels in question. And this is also related at the end of the day to this whole complexity when it comes to creating traceability in the supply chain and ensuring transparency. So I would like to ask to the panelists, what are the main challenges, in your opinion, in creating traceable and transparent seafood supply chains and in communicating this to the consumers? I'm not sure who would like to go first, because this one is maybe the most complex one so far. Maybe Michel first this time?
Yeah,
Okay.
Sure. So, of course, when we talk about fisheries, we're dealing with a producer that's far at sea. So obviously traceability and transparency is an issue. I have very good and can be damaging for the trust of consumers, of course. I have very good hopes that digitalization can help out a lot with that. And of course now seafood labels, or trusted, recognized seafood labels like MSC also do their job with the chain of custody. But I think the weakness of seafood guides and also certification schemes is that it's always about a big group in a fishery. So it's always about a method in combination with the species. And I think it would be very more an incentive for fishermen to improve if there was more differentiation on individual level. But then also, of course, you have the challenge to keep the information for the consumers as simple as possible. So I think there's a main challenge because you want to be correct, but you also want to be complete and differentiate. Because that motivation for an individual fisherman, and that can be the same for a farm, I guess, to improve is lacking because of that.
Thank you, Michelle. Maybe also from the side of aquaculture, Alistair, what is your perspective on transparency and traceability?
Just need to find my mouse to unmute myself. Then, you know, aquaculture basically you have the option to have full traceability from the egg to market, and that wasn't always the case, of course, in fisheries. So there, as I think, as we use technology to better predict the outcomes of our production cycles, as I mentioned earlier, we're collecting a lot of data on the way. So we have a huge amount of data that's linked to the production per se, which is of course useful for the producer, but can also be used as part of big data sets that can be used to be outward pointing and focused on this level of traceability. Food label literacy is, I don't know about in general terms, Sean, but in seafood, it's a maze. There are so many, and it's hard to really position where you are, apart from labels that you already know and you already trust, which might be quality labels, or it might be food advocacy, chain advocacy levels, as Michelle was mentioning with MSC, and of course the equivalent of ASC for aquaculture. We also have Label Rouge, for example, in France. French consumers know that for many years and see it as being, you know, good quality, price quality, let's say. So I think it's not for nothing that a lot of European money, at least, and probably this is the case with national research programs, has put resources, economic resources, into this question. With regard to digitalization and the role of traceability and how that can improve our food chains. And seafood is no exception to that. So the resources are there for a reason, and there are drivers for that. And hopefully we can do a lot better on that in the coming years for sure.
And Sean, I would also like to give you the floor on this question.
Yeah, I think my first thought is that ultimately solutions come from admitting there's a problem and recognition of what that problem is, and that's one of the first places I think we actually need. I don't think seafood is unique, but seafood does face some particular challenges. Certainly with wild capture fisheries, it's all happening out there, and to a certain extent that relies on the honesty of those who are catching, and also the accuracy of the information that they are able to deliver. If you have a crate of cod that is delivered to market, but it's mislabeled somewhere along the line as haddock, by the time it's been processed, you're never going to be able to. No one set about to falsify that information. It's just that somewhere the system has gone awry. So I think there are very particular problems with wild capture. I do think we have a huge amount to gain from understanding the aquaculture, because you are able to have that traceability from beginning to end. But there is also a lot of resources going into this. I'm part of 3 projects that are looking at this problem from different perspectives. Another one called Fish EU Trust, which is specifically looking at the pathways that high quality fish products go and how we improve those traceability. And they're trying to expand it, not just fish to market, but market to product. Because in the end, when you look at a fish pie, my colleagues in VERIFISH will now laugh at me because it's always the example I give them. You've got lumps of white fish and lumps of pink fish. Now, most of us can probably guess the pink stuff is salmon. The rest of us are going to struggle to know what the white stuff is. It could be haddock, it could be cod, it could even be smoked haddock, but without a dye in it. So there are complexities there. As a food composition organisation, we've had discussions where we go back to the Latin name and we have literally put the food on the table and asked people, what do you call that? But when we try to do it with fish, people kind of go, fish. Because our own familiarity with the product is not perhaps as easy as something like a cherry tomato. So I think there are lots of levels, and we probably need to nibble away at each of those. And then, as Alistair was talking about, it's also about delivering the data in a robust way. And there are projects that are looking at delivery of that data, or delivery of high quality products that have a certain kudos around them, where we're trying to make sure that data is more robust. And I strongly believe that those technologies can be moved across into the seafood sector. So, for example, we've got a project called Alliance that is looking at the DNA that is moved around olive oil. And I believe that ultimately could be, as a technology, moved into the seafood sector that would allow you to have greater transparency there. So I think it's a case that we know there's an issue. We know increasingly where the issues are, and we should be confident that we're trying to tackle those.
Thank you, Sean. Michelle or Alistair, would you still like to react on what Sean just mentioned? Otherwise, yes, Alistair, yes.
In a nutshell, the kind of tools we have now, the technology, you mentioned DNA testing and this kind of thing, non-invasive testing of products at any point in the value chain is getting so much easier. And we're starting to use that and incorporate that as testings, whether it's against fraud, whether it's against illegal fishing, whether it's against whatever potential problem that we have. The tools we have now are so much better and so much quicker to give us data than we had before. That's the first point. And I want to come back to something that Sean said earlier, which was about the omega-6 levels as we transition to plant-fed diets to replace the fish meal and fish oil we used a lot of 20 years ago. And that's also a question I see in the Q&A, but we might address that at a later stage. There's this idea, when we were using fish meal and fish oil, especially 20 years ago, I was working in the aquaculture feed sector, and we worked out we were giving in our diets 3 times more omega-3 than we actually need as a dietary recommendation in our daily intake for human nutrition. What a waste. What a huge waste of resources. And of course, half of that feed wasn't even getting eaten, because what feed drops out the bottom of a fish cage is lost, and it's just adding to our environmental footprint. So as we manage feed better, first of all, and as we use ingredients that give us a much wider range of options, because we're not talking about raw materials in fish feed, we're talking about nutrient profiles. We're talking about individual nutrient requirements that we've understood much more about through the biology of fishes that we understand more, and not just fishes, other species that we grow as well. And we're understanding about the transportation of those nutrients from the feed to the animal, as it were. So we'll come back maybe to talk about plants if you want to, because it's an interest. It's a subject close to my heart. Land-based plants are probably the biggest impact to the environmental footprint of aquaculture products. and there's so much waste in producing plants on land. So producing plants in water is the way in which we're going, and we're getting there. Terrestrial-based plants has, for me, been a transitional phase to quickly get us weaned off fish and fish meal and fish oil. We have other options that we're using now and have become commercially viable with insect protein and other protein sources. So what I'm basically saying is, when I was working in aquaculture feeds all that time ago, we were looking at 4, 5, 6 major pillars of our fish feeds at that time. Now we're looking at formulations coming from 20, 30, 40 ingredients.
Thank you very much for the precision, Alistair. You mentioned that someone was also asking about this issue on the more plant-based side of the question. So if this is okay for you, I would now like to take some of the questions from the floor. In the audience, if you still have some more questions, please feel free to share them in the Q&A section. I will maybe take one of the very first one that came from Daniel. Do invasive species play a role as either a direct food source or as a source of feed for aquaculture production? And I believe this might be referring to the lionfish, for instance, in the Mediterranean, or the blue crab, for instance. I don't know, maybe for aquaculture first, Alistair, you would be able to answer that, and then we can go to Michelle and Sean.
I guess the simple answer is it depends what sea basin you're working in, and also when it comes to freshwater aquaculture, then there are of course invasive species there. But the Portuguese oyster, the cupped oyster, or whatever you want to call it, is an invasive species that was introduced about 30, 40 years ago after our European oyster, the flat oyster, was wiped out by a disease called bulimia. And so we introduced this on purpose, if you like, and it just went ballistic, and it's probably the most invasive species, but we like it and we eat it, and we do a lot of things with it. You mentioned blue crabs, and blue crabs, there's a lot of work being done, especially in Italy now, because it's a problem that's linked to the Adriatic, and especially the clam fisheries naturally along both sides of the Adriatic. And there more and more work is being done on how to add value to those blue crabs, and so that invasive species has to a certain extent become in some ways an additional product. But there are also downsides of that, and we hear people about how do we use these fishes. We don't know these species, they're new to us. How can we add value to them? Can we propose them to consumers? And then an example outside of Europe is coming from Chesapeake Bay, which is naturally a fantastic natural resource for shellfish production. One of the biggest problems, if you like, in invasive species there has been the blue catfish. And there's been a lot of work done by Virginia Tech and other research institutes to make blue catfish into the savior of the Chesapeake Bay area, and restaurants have been bought into this, chefs have been bought into this. It's a great fish, has great texture, etc. It's up there, totally unknown, totally thought of as being a huge risk and a destructor, and now turning into a life thread for producers and fishers within Chesapeake.
Thank you, Alistair. Michelle or Sean, one of you would like to share their thoughts on the use of invasive species as direct seafood source, for instance? If you have any knowledge on the question. Michelle, I see you're unmuting yourself.
Not much to add, but besides that, you first need to catch them. And
Yes.
that's not always easy, and you need to prepare them. So, for example, with lionfish, especially in Caribbean places, they're living at very difficult places to catch them at depth. So yeah, it's unfortunately not always possible, but I think the American crayfish is a good example that people could eat more. That would really help, because they're causing a lot of harm.
Yeah,
And
no,
Sean?
not my
Yes.
not my area.
Not your area of expertise, that's okay. Thank you very much. Another question we got from Holly, she was asking, are farmed fish the chicken of the sea? can the panel address welfare, animal welfare, especially in the context of aquaculture? How can we grow the industry sustainably and ethically without offsetting costs onto consumers? This is, animal welfare, an important question. Who would like to go first on this? Michelle, yes.
Okay, yes. So aquaculture is not my field of expertise, but fish welfare is.
Yes.
So what I've learned from my colleagues in the catch welfare platform that are working a lot on aquaculture is that a lot of times welfare is not costing more. Sometimes it is, of course, when you have to buy a stunner, but it's in a lot of times improving a lot of things in your business. So, for example, when a fish is living a happier life and has more welfare, it's also more resilient to diseases, which is a big problem, I think, in aquaculture that you want to prevent. But it's also eating less food. Yeah, that's benefits in sustainability wise, but also for the costs of the farm. It's still a lot under development. There is a lot of knowledge, but I think there's a lot to gain on this field. Also, for example, for shelf life, an animal that was treated better is less damaged, also has a longer shelf life. That's why you see a difference, for example, in farmed turbot has a shelf life of, I think, 3 weeks. And a turbot that was caught, for example, with demersal trawl that is always a bit damaged, has a shorter shelf life. So it's also a food waste matter. So yeah, definitely a lot to gain there, but a long road to go as well.
So not just an issue in aquaculture, but also a discussion in the fisheries sector then. Sean or Alistair, would you also like to answer this question? Maybe Alistair for the aquaculture aspect there?
Yes, thanks, Holly, for this question. As soon as I saw the words in your question, chicken of the sea, I immediately thought of tilapia. This is what globally was considered as the chicken of the sea for several reasons. Basically, it was cheap to produce. 1 pound of fish. Let's use that measuring system for 1 pound of tilapia. That was the big cry. So a decade or so ago, tilapia was considered as the chicken of the sea. Now I don't know whether fish wants to be related to chicken anymore. So let's move away from that. But when it comes to welfare. Years and years ago, we were measuring, our welfare indicator was death of a fish. If a fish doesn't survive, then there's something wrong with the welfare. Now we're getting a lot better, but also welfare has been related to the moment of slaughter, when we take the fish out of production and it goes into the processing stage. And of course, aquaculture was kind of put up as being a naughty boy there, or naughty child there. But actually, when you look at the way now that fish are aggregated in cages, kept in underwater, kept in specific boats to take them back to processing, using electrical stunning with machines that turn around the fish, make sure it's pointing the right way. So the electrical stunning process is done at a point where the fish are not super stressed or frightened or whatever, as land animals may be, especially when you only have certain abattoirs that are related. So you get rid of this transport to death, as it were. And the time it takes to actually kill a fish is milliseconds, because it's prepared in the right way, let's say. What we're doing now, as Michelle mentioned, of the colleagues that she has and the people that she talks to relating to aquaculture, welfare has become like a pillar, a cross-cutting horizontal issue of aquaculture production. Nutrition and health management are the keys to producing good quality food. And welfare is a part of that. It's proactive. It starts from breeding. And then as you start for the juvenile and younger stages, that's the baseline, like us, as we grow into adults. So if nutrition is good and welfare is good at that time, there's a knock-on effect and it stays there for a lot of the production cycle. As fish and consumers become more aware of the fact that animals are salient beings, and can feel pain, etc., etc. We see this on news headlines. And it applies to not only intelligent species, I'm sure. It goes a lot deeper than that. So welfare is a driver that aquaculture producers have understood and understand for a long time. They just didn't really have the tools to be able to accurately measure it so that they could reproduce it. And now that is happening. And they're as much concerned about welfare to be able to produce their best quality product for the market, because everybody has a pride in what they do and what they deliver with whatever animal, farmed animal or other, that we are providing for human nutrition. So yeah, we've come a long way, and welfare is at the heart of aquaculture production operations for sure.
Yeah, and
Thank
what I
you
would
very
like
much,
to add
Alistair.
before it was always about preventing negative welfare, and health and welfare are very related. It's not necessarily one-on-one, but it was always focused on avoiding negative welfare. But now there's also a lot of research on positive welfare. So, for example, environmental enrichment. So that is now, I think, but that comes with challenges as well. But it's also very promising for the welfare of fish.
Just a very quick point there, Michelle. You're absolutely right. And you make me think of something which was, there was a Scottish company called No Catch, producing farmed cod some years ago. They had a lovely marketing campaign. I love their labels and all that kind of thing. And the problem they had with cod farming, and this was the same in Norway as well, was that the cod were biting through the cages and trying to get out. And sea bream do this. Others are quite happy to stay there and say, okay, cool, we've got a barrier. But others want to get out. And when one fish makes a hole in the net, not all fish will follow others through that hole, but some will. So to stop cod nibbling at the cages because they were bored, because the cages had algae growing on them, so it was in a food source, whatever, the guys put toys in the floating cages to not only increase welfare, but to stop them escaping, basically, and to give them something to do apart from just be fed. So there's more that we're learning now as well about playing music in land-based farming and how fish react to that. So there's a lot that we still don't know and a lot that we don't understand yet. And so we're trying, and we're trying to record whether that has an impact or not.
Thank you, Alistair and Michelle. So I don't know, Sean, from your perspective, if there is anything to say about welfare from the nutritional angle.
Well, I kind of lean into what Alistair's saying, that we know that intensive farming processes on land have not always led to nutritionally optimal products. So the animal is stressed, or the nutrition that is provided to the animal is not ideal. It perhaps is not using its muscles in the best way, and consequently we get an inferior product as in terms of both nutrition, texture, mouthfeel, any number of issues around food. And if we're going to continue to have some meat or seafood in our diets rather than switching entirely to plant-based foods, and I suspect it sort of applies to plants as well, but in a different way, we have to make sure that they are reared in the most optimal way, because happy animals, happy product, in terms of both nutrition and other factors that consumers value. And coming back to a point that Alistair made earlier about the waste of omega-3 going into the fillet, one of the areas that I think really is open for more exploration is the optimization of the feed, because in a different project we looked at increasing selenium and iodine in sea bream and another species that I can't remember at the moment, and what they found was that, again, it doesn't matter how much you put into the feed. The fish has homeostasis in the same way that we do, and if the animal is replete, it is not going to take up those micronutrients from the diet. You're not going to be able to manipulate the composition of the fillet, and therefore it is not only a waste of money, but it impacts the environment that those fish are being reared in, and there is ultimately no benefit either for the fish or indeed for the consumer. So much more work is needed on, I think, the feed composition that would benefit both the industry but also consumers.
I feel like we could have a whole different webinar just to talk about this question of on animal welfare.
Yeah.
Yes. Maybe something to keep in mind. I see we have a few more questions maybe to take on before closing the panel. The next one is from Emily Susan. How are the wild and cultivated systems dealing with contamination? So she says pollutants, toxins, heavy metals. And what do consumers need to know? Again, a very complex question in the context of our overall issue of can we still eat seafood? This time I would like to go to Siân first for this issue, if this is okay for you.
That's interesting because this is definitely not me. It's interesting that in the nutrition world, we have largely separated nutrients, bioactives. So those are things like the polyphenols that we're pretty sure do something in terms of benefiting health at the population and the dietary level, but they are not, as we understand it, essential in the way that nutrients are. And then there's contaminants. And contaminants are monitored differently depending on which member state you are, even though they come under joint legislation. And so my point is that we need better understanding of the contaminants that are in seafoods. There is this impression amongst consumers that, oh, I can't eat that, it's got trace metals in it. Or, well, you know, the Food Authority has said that women of childbearing age should eat this many portions of oily fish, but and children should eat this many, but everybody else can eat this many. Well, why? And when they investigate, they discover it's because of the small increase in risk around trace metal intakes. And I don't know that we're communicating that very well. So maybe my point is we need to do better in this area, but it's not my area.
Thank you, Siân. Alistair or Michelle, would one of you like to react to this? Maybe Michelle first for the wild catch system.
Yeah, this is also not really my field. All I know is that the higher in the trophic system, the more risky it is, and the more fatty the fish is, the more risky it is of having toxins in it. But that's all I know. There's more control in aquaculture on contaminants. I think in wild capture, it's always the question.
And I'm certainly not an expert. I'm not an expert on this either. I just know what I hear, if you like, and what I hear about the science that's going on around this. And indeed, we need to dissociate different contaminants, as we call them. And it's true that generally, the further up the food chain that you eat, then there's more bioaccumulation of things that are ingested further down that trophic level, as Michelle was just saying. And yet, we see examples of people that have eaten swordfish all their lives, living to 98 and 99 years of age or whatever. So it's all about risk and benefit. Siân initially, right at the start of this discussion, talked about the benefits of eating seafood and why it has to be on our menus. And there are benefits and risks that come from us. It's up to us to be able to understand what those risks are and are the benefits outweighing those, so that we're going to eat seafood at certain times of the week or whatever, or at certain places because we want to eat it. We like to eat it. It tastes good, and we're getting nutritional value from it. On the downside of that, there are risks with everything that we eat. An example of does not go into the heavy metal point of view, but again, coming back to the idea that Siân just mentioned that we could make a whole webinar about on aqua feeds, is the idea of contaminants in the feed materials that we're using. And as we move away from using oily fish in those ingredient sources, then that is being reduced. But we do get contaminants that are coming from, for example, freshwater runoff from agriculture. And so there's environmental stresses that are coming in as well. One of the other stories, of course, that's taking a lot of news is the whole idea of microplastics and nanoplastics, which are everywhere. That's part of what we breathe and certainly part of what we eat. And some research I saw some time ago showed that a lot of, at least the micron, probably part of the nanoplastics are actually passing through fish intestinal tracts. So in fact, the stomachs, as they're removed during very initial cleaning, are taking out a lot of that. But we are finding those in the fillet, but we find them in absolutely everything that we eat. So we're going to have to get used to it. If you like, the ocean is going to have to get used to it, because it's not anytime soon that nanoplastics, at least on our planet, are going to come down to levels of where they were some decades ago, for sure.
Yeah, Alistair. I will take the last question from the Q&A before we close the panel. This is a question from Nicola that you already mentioned earlier, Alistair, and it's directed to you. I think the most sustainable would be a vegetarian fish grown at sea, fed with seaweed, grown by photosynthesis. Alistair, is there a huge investment into genetic modification to develop such species?
Some people would argue that we already have quite a lot of vegetarianism in the piscivorous or omnivorous or even carnivorous fish that we produce. And a lot of fish that are favored by consumers are these high-end, high-level, mainly piscivorous fish. In other words, fish that eat fish, of course. When it comes to omnivores, we eat a lot of omnivorous fish, and we actually eat herbivorous fish as well, at least in fresh water, when you were talking about the expansion of Mr.Goodfish also, and VERIFISH with regard to freshwater species. So we already are, to a certain extent. People are talking about, are we vegetarianizing salmon because we're using a lot of plant-based feeds for salmon production, and is that a good idea or a good thing? The genetic modification, those two words, they're scary, aren't they? And they've scared us for so many years. And when you see operations that are genetically modifying species by adding genetic material from another species, for example, it becomes a little bit scary. When you modify them by using their own DNA or RNA, then the words are the same, but in fact, it's a lot less ethically questionable. So the genetic modification also comes from the selection programs that we're doing. We have a lot of tools now to be able to measure different traits that we want to have, and to be able to speed up the measurement of those, so we can breed and tailor breeding programs for that. We've done 18, 19, 20 generations in Atlantic salmon. We've done 10, 12 generations in Mediterranean species, sea bass and sea bream, for example. So we're still kind of early stages, but again, we've been genetically modifying fish by selection, as we've genetically modified pretty well all of the fruit and vegetables that we eat through selection. When you actually want to tailor a fish to eat vegetarian feeds, it's not about actually changing the fish. It's about changing the feed to make it more digestible. For example, with plant-based feeds, it's about having enzyme and or let's say ingredient activators that can help that dissemination, that digestibility and uptake. And if you're not winning there, you're not going to use that feed ingredient, because again, it's a waste of that resource. So a fish grown at sea fed by seaweed, when we talk about seaweed, we're basically saying macroalgae, and seaweed has been tested as aquaculture feeds for some years, and it hasn't been taken up to a commercial level. So something is wrong, if you like, that's not driving investment into seaweed-based aquaculture feeds, or we're not there on the knowledge level to get that innovation into the market. Seaweed, for my personal opinion, has a much better future in packaging. And we see many examples of that. And if the whole seafood sector was using seaweed-based packaging, then I'd be a happy fellow today. So plants grown at sea fed with seaweed, not maybe macroalgae, but much more the microalgae. We can produce that in very high concentration. We can more or less tailor it to the nutritional profile that we want. There are several projects now, and there are many products available as health promoters, but also as nutritional building blocks that are based on algae. So they're already there.
Thank you very much, Alistair, for answering Nicola's question. my voice is starting to go down a little, so it's a sign we're slowly reaching the end. Yes, cheers to you too, Alistair. So before we close the panel, I would like to ask one last question to each of the speakers. So now that we have heard from different perspectives when it comes to responsible seafood consumption and production, we looked into health, we looked into ethics, we looked into nutrition, welfare, traceability, transparency. We covered a lot of ground during this panel. So I would like you to come back to the question of the session: can we still eat seafood? And I would like to give the floor first to Michelle for this one.
Yeah. Yes, if you want, you can. But realize that the seafood that you eat, it has an impact on the environment, and you have an impact by choosing the right one, I think. So use your impact wisely, I would say.
Thank you. Then Alistair?
I'm going to use a pun. It's a no-brainer. The answer is yes. Seafood, whether it's coming from responsible fisheries or responsible aquaculture, let's use that word, there's nothing better for brain and heart health, as we have aging populations, and especially for our young ones and their brain development. There's nothing better than what you can get from seafood that you can't just get from tablets that you might take as feed supplements or dietary supplements. We mentioned omega-3, we mentioned selenium, iodine. Iodine, I was shocked to hear some years ago that there was like a European-wide deficiency in iodine, and Siân helped me out with that the other day.
Most of the micronutrients.
Yeah, exactly. And deionizing salt, for example, etc. But I mean, think about the other aspects and the benefits of seafood. They ease joint pain, they strengthen immunity, they help against depression. That's been shown now with omega-3, for example, and the long chain omega-3, not just anything. But from the other perspectives, of course, everyone makes their own choices, and we all have individual rights to make our own choices. We all have those opinions. I don't like it when people force their opinions onto me about what I should eat. But I'm free to make my choices and my opinions. And making my choices is helped by initiatives that we're doing and discussing today, and tools that we're developing, such as VERIFISH and Mr.Goodfish3. There's a book that just came out before this wonderful week-long conference from a guy called John Goodland, who's an advisor to the Sustainable Ocean Fund. I'm just going to read a couple of lines I grabbed from that. His book is called Food from the Sea, The Future of Seafood. And the quote was, "The ocean must be protected and its unique marine habitats conserved. At the same time, if we're going to solve the problem of feeding the world's growing population, the ocean must be embraced as the efficient and climate-smart food production system that it is. These are not mutually exclusive alternatives." And for me, that puts it into a very good perspective. And that's the way that I would answer your question, Clara.
Thank you very much, Alistair. And to conclude, Siân, the last word for you.
I think we should have left it with Alistair. Not just our young ones. Most of us, anybody over 40, our gut is not working as well as it used to. It's a depressing fact. Immune system and gut start declining. And seafood provides one of the best sources of high quality, easily digestible protein. And it provides a number of micronutrients that plant-based foods can only provide if they were fortified. So there you go. Can we eat still continue? Yes, but we should do it with increasing effort around making sure that it's sustainable, and that we leave healthy people and healthy planet.
Thank you very much, Siân. So this concludes the panel. Before I move to the last section, I would like to say a big thank you to Alistair, Michelle, and Siân for your contribution, for answering my questions and the questions of the audience. And a big thank you to the audience as well for your questions, which have helped address different aspects that were not yet in my lists for today. So thank you to all of you. I will now give the floor to Daniel Hayes, who is the Marine Research Director at the Cyprus Marine and Maritime Institute, CMMI, and who is also the coordinator of the Mr.Goodfish3.0 project. Dan, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Clara, and thank you everyone for attending, those online, the panelists, all the people in VERIFISH and Mr. Goodfish. It's been really exciting. I'm not a fisheries expert by training, but I'm learning more and more every day, and it's very exciting to hear all of your excellent work, excellent comments. I'm just going to close with 2 minutes about our voluntary ocean commitment, which is part of the UNOC process and the Ocean Decade process in combination. And I'm speaking on behalf, sort of, you might say unofficially, but the slides I'm going to show you represent the combined contributions of both of these efforts that you just heard about, Mr. Goodfish and VERIFISH. And just a little bit of a preface, voluntary could be put in quotes, because obviously a lot of the work that was presented and that will be done is contractual. So we have a contract with the commission to do certain things, but a lot of it isn't. So the fact that we're here today and VERIFISH and Mr. Goodfish 3.0 are working together is not a contract obligation. And, you know, the amount of effort and energy that we spend, in my view, has already exceeded the contractual obligations. And especially when you consider that we aim to make this outputs, these results of these projects carry much longer into the future after the end of the project. So there's a legacy, and we hope that this is only the start of something. So we commit to this legacy in a sense. As you have already seen, these are 2 European projects, and they have a number of partners, and we're doing a lot of work around campaigning for responsible consumption of products from the sea, but also on the production side, there's some work. At the end of these projects, we will have 2 mobile apps. We'll have sustainability indicators framework. We'll even have a collaborative board game called Pillars of the Sea. I'm very excited about that one. We'll have social media influencer campaign, plenty of educational materials and workshops, especially for children. And these are just the things that are really indicated in the project scope of work. To do all of that, of course, it takes some years. There's nearly 4 million euros invested from the European Commission for this. It's covering all of the major basins in Europe. We're covering expertise all the way from nutrition science, marine science, fisheries, aquaculture, education, communication, social media. It's cross-cutting, a lot of sectors involved, and I'm happy to say that it's all working quite well to now. And I think that's a good sign that we all have the same sort of objectives, as so nicely put a few minutes ago by the panelists. It's quite clear that these projects and this commitment relates to SDG 14. Maybe it's indirect because maybe it's coming through the consumers, but we're really trying to target the way that we collect and produce seafood, obviously. So trying to make this more responsible and more sustainable, at least. In particular, we have science-based fisheries management plans coming out of these projects. We have special labeling, traceability, and certification programs, as you've already seen. We've also addressed another aspect of SDG 14, which is to provide an opening for some of the smaller scale fishers to the markets. So it's not easy for your voice to be heard if you're providing a niche product. And I think through these 2 projects, we will be providing a window for some of these smaller producers to make themselves known and to address a real need in the market. So this has to do with eco-labeling, traceability, community empowerment for the management of the fisheries. With that, I just want to say again, one huge thank you to everybody involved, and I'm really excited to be part of this effort. And I hope that we can all meet each other in person very soon.
Thank you very much, Dan, and congratulations to VERIFISH and Mr.Goodfish3.0 for their voluntary commitments, which will be available in the following week and submitted to the UN. You will see it in the database of voluntary commitments under SDG 14. And if yourself in the audience have voluntary commitments you would like to submit, we encourage you to follow the example of the two projects and contribute to protecting the ocean. I would like to say a big thank you to our speakers. I can't really clap, but I will make it silently. Thank you to also members of the audience who came to listen and contribute to this session, as well as to Dennis, who has taken care of managing the backend, my colleague Dennis Sajese. Thank you for your support in silence in the backend. And I would also like to thank the United Nations Ocean Conference for accepting our event as a side virtual event partner for this very important UNOC conference. For those of you who are in Nice, I hope you keep enjoying the conference one day longer. And for the others, we look forward to hearing a bit more about what has happened during this conference back in Nice. And I will leave you on these words. Yes, you can still eat seafood. Have a nice day. Thank you, everyone.